Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining the webinar today. We've got a great topic of our Self-Fi products as we have our sales director, Steve Purcell, giving an overview for the Verizon product line. So we're excited to have you here today. Just kind of housekeeping on how this works. Go ahead and use that chat panel and you can ask questions throughout. And I'll either try to answer those. If I think it's one that everyone needs to hear, I'll go ahead and put it out to the group and pause Steve while he's talking. Otherwise, if we don't know the answer, and we are not the engineers, so there's every once in a while there's a question that we can't answer, we will follow up after the call. So thanks for joining today. And Steve, are you ready to go?
Okay, thanks, Dean. As Dean said, I'm a sales director for Nextivity, and I focus a lot on Verizon. So before we jump in, the purpose of this, as Dean said again, is to talk specifically about products and solutions that we have available for the Verizon network. But before we dive in, just a little bit of background. The company Nextivity was founded in 2006. We are headquartered in San Diego, California, and have offices around the world. We are approved by 200 mobile network operators in 100 different countries around the world for use on their network. So we really started out as sort of an international solutions provider, and more recently have developed and launched products for the North American market, and specifically for Verizon. So this is just kind of a graphic showing kind of, what are we different, or why are we different? What is Self-Fi? So Self-Fi is our brand name. As I said, Nextivity is the company, Self-Fi is the brand name. A lot of people know us more by Self-Fi, but what's unique to us is that we have developed our own proprietary chipsets and embedded software and the radios inside and all the hardware. I mean, everything about this set of products has been developed from the ground up, and we own all the intellectual property. We've got over 20 patents on this stuff. In addition to the hardware, we've got some software tools available as well, which we'll get into a bit more. So there's several key things about us versus our competition. Number one, we are able, because of the way we interact with Verizon's network, we are able to boost signals much more than our competitors are, up to 1,000 times stronger signal level coming off of our coverage units. Low cost of installation and ownership, especially compared to the big iron DAS. And because kind of our underlying design philosophy is to make it easy, make it simple, make it foolproof, our products are generally very easy to set up and get going. And probably most importantly, from your perspective, we are network safe. And what that means for Verizon is that Dennis McCall from maintenance engineering has been into our headquarters. He's tested our products, and he has approved us for deployment on Verizon's network. So you can, with confidence, tell your customers that we are approved for deployment on the Verizon network. Mentioned we had some software tools. We have a Wave app, which is a phone app or PC app that is used to interact with our smaller products, the Pro, the Duo, and the Go, which I'll talk about in a second. And then we have our Wave portal, which is a cloud-based portal system, which is used for Quatra, which is our DAS product. And you can use this tool to monitor your sites and control things and troubleshoot from remotely. So those are tools that are available. So let's get into the product a bit. There's really four kind of categories. We have a mobile product, which is called GoM, and then we have the small business, really started as a home offering. There's two products in this category, Pro and Duo Plus. Pro is the AT&T version, Duo Plus is the Verizon version. Actually, there's three because there's a T-Mobile version too, but the one you guys care about is the Duo Plus, which is the Verizon only version. And then we also have a stationary version of the Go product, which is called Go X. So that would be used for industrial applications. It's a hardened case, so it can stand up to harsher environments. And then the thing we're probably going to spend the most time on today is our Sulfide Quattro product, which is our DAS offering. So let's jump into these. First of all, the Duo Plus. It's a two-box solution. There's the two pieces are called a network unit and a coverage unit. And the network unit gets installed typically by a window where you've got at least one bar of coverage signal coming in from the outside. And then the coverage unit gets placed somewhere else in the building. And these two communicate with each other wirelessly. So literally all that's involved is plug in the network unit, allow it to boot up, plug in the coverage unit, and it'll boot up, and that's it. It just works. So this product has become very popular for companies with small office locations up to about 15,000 square feet. So, I mean, we do a lot with big companies that just happen to have a lot of small locations. So even though it started as a home product, it's become very popular for small office applications. The bands that we boost with the Duo Plus for Verizon are the band 2, 4, and 13. So 1900 megahertz, 2100 megahertz, and 700 megahertz. And the way it works is that this network unit actually communicates with the cell site and will identify the best, cleanest, strongest signals that are being broadcast by that cell site. And we'll latch onto 2 of those. So two out of the 3 we will boost simultaneously. And you'll see on the front of the network unit, there's bars, very familiar to people. And like I said, we need 1 bar at least on this unit. And for Verizon, we do LTE only. So that's important to note as well. So this is the network unit, the one with the bars on it. And then the coverage unit has a number on it that'll vary between 1 and 9. And basically what that's telling you is how big your coverage bubble around the coverage unit is. So 9 is the best. That means you have the biggest coverage bubble. It still works if you have, a 3, but it's just not as big of a bubble. And it's a little bit counterintuitive, but actually moving these 2 units further apart will help increase the size of your coverage bubble. So jumping over to the Go product, again, we've got 2 different versions of it. We've got the Go M for mobile usage and Go X for stationary usage. One of the biggest differences is the Go X, we can produce up to 100 dB of gain, and with the Go M up to 65, and those are based on FCC limitations. There's also some differences in the way the M and the X interact with the cell site, because with an M, with the mobile version, it's going to be handing off from cell site to cell site as the vehicle moves. So it does behave a little bit differently. The unit itself is NEMA rated, so it can be mounted outdoors. Again, we do relay 2 bands concurrently, and here it is. So this is just a closer up view of it. On each end of this device, there's an SMA connector that on one side, you'll connect a donor antenna, which means it's going to talk to the donor cell site. And then on the other side of this unit, there's another SMA connector that will connect to a server antenna, and that's what's going to broadcast the signal within the building. Again, up to about 15,000 square feet of gain with the stationary version. So this is kind of what it looks like. Donor antenna on one side, the Go device, and then a server antenna. And we do have a lot of different options available in terms of antennas. And here's just kind of a diagram showing donor antenna on the outside of a building, the Go unit, and then a server antenna inside the building. And when you would use this instead of the Duo, remember I said you have to have at least 1 bar of signal for the Duo to work. And sometimes buildings don't have 1 bar. So in this picture here, it's showing maybe a bank that has real thick walls and there's no signal inside. So that's why you have to put a donor antenna on the outside. Another great example where we see this used a lot is in, you picture a cafeteria in a hospital base. And, Verizon's trying to do, so they need a cell signal down there for the backhaul. because the devices are communicating over the LTE network. So this is a way to get a good signal down into the basement of a building, for instance. This is a typical Go installation. You might have a Yagi antenna mounted outside on a pole, connected to the Go, and then a wideband omnidirectional indoor antenna. So that's kind of a standard configuration. You also can use splitters and do multiple donor antennas depending on your signal strength coming in. So for Go X, like I said, the unit itself is sold individually, and then you buy whatever antennas you need for your particular application. For the Go M, we do actually kit that, and we kit it with a small magnetic mount antenna that would go obviously on the roof of the vehicle, a small server antenna that has double-sided tape on the back of it so you can stick it anywhere in the vehicle, and then a cigarette lighter adapter for a power supply. Just as an example with Go, there was an elementary school, kind of rural, and the administrative offices had no coverage. And we were able to use Go to bring good solid signal strength into the administrative offices and even around the outside areas of the buildings. So parents and teachers alike would be able to use their cell phones. The Go M, obviously it's intended for mobile. Some particular applications would be, a fleet of trucks, delivery vehicles, and even boats, where you might be out on your boat and you can get a little signal from land, but what we can do is grab that little signal and boost it and provide good coverage inside the boat. And then another big market for us on this product is RVs, where people will obviously use the mobile capabilities while they're driving. And then when they stop at a campsite or the NASCAR track or wherever, you can actually switch the Go unit from mobile to stationary to get a little higher boost. So it's become very, very popular in the RV market as well. Here's sort of the setup for a marine bundle. In this case, we don't kit this, but you can buy these individually. We have a specialized marine antenna that's all made out of stainless steel to avoid corrosion. Again, a server antenna and a DC power adapter for power.
Yeah, Steve, we do have a question from Jim out here. He was asking if this product, he actually has a couple questions in here, competes with the WeBoost Connect 4GX.
So I guess at first glance you could say that it does. I'm not real familiar with that particular product. The difference though between us and the Wilson products like the WeBoost is that they are broadband amplifiers, whereas we are carrier specific. So we're going to grab just the Verizon signals and we're going to amplify those. Broadband amplifiers are going to grab everything that's in the air, including all the noise, and they're going to bring that in and they're going to amplify it all. And the issue with that is that you get poor performance for the user, and more importantly, it can very easily introduce feedback and interference back to the cell site. And so the carriers do not care for broadband repeaters in general because of the havoc they can wreak with their cell sites.
Yeah, just to add to that, as I'm pretty familiar with the product as well, because they're not carrier specific and they're just a broadband amplifier, they have a gain threshold that is lower than what we're doing. So on the mobile product, they're limited to 50 dB, where we're at 65, which is roughly 100 times stronger. And then on the stationary product, they're limited to 70 dB, where we go up to 100 dB, which is again about 1,000 times stronger than what they're able to do. Fundamental difference, the smart technology, it is sniffing around basically and looking at what the environment is, and at the millisecond level, delivering the right amount of gain on our side, where as Steve said, they're just amplifying whatever's out there that's in existence across all the mediums. So that's 50 dB total. So that's the core difference. Now, the second question was, Verizon recommends fiber fed. How does Verizon feel about going off the macro? And Steve, you mentioned Dennis a little earlier, and I'll let you answer that one.
Yeah, generally, in most cases, it's fine. I mean, you might run into situations where a cell site is really critically loaded and it might cause issues, but usually with these products, you're only talking about a few users and a very small area that you're covering. So it typically does not cause any problems for the cell site. The other alternative, as you mentioned, is to use like an eFemto or a small cell. And that's certainly something that users do as well. The challenge there is that a lot of times the customer is unwilling or unable to provide an internet backhaul, which is required for the small cell. And also the small cells require a GPS signal, which means line of sight to the sky somewhere. So installing those sometimes becomes difficult in terms of finding a place where you can get an internet connection and a GPS location.
I want to be a little bit more direct on the answer on who Dennis McCall is, Steve, and that Verizon has approved this product and is actually promoting it as well.
Okay, sure. So on the network side of the house, there's an organization called Maintenance Engineering, and there's different people in that, and they approve basically everything that goes in to the network. And Dennis, part of what he does is approve in-building solutions. And he has approved us. In fact, he calls me from time to time and directs customers my way when he hears of either a Verizon person that's got a customer with an issue, or sometimes directly the customer. So he loves our technology, and he's good with us for sure. Is that good, Dean?
Yeah.
Okay. So jumping back to the slides, we recently launched another antenna that's intended for truckers and for RVs. It's, as you can see in the picture, it's got kind of the spring at the bottom, which is typical of truck antennas. Again, all the pieces are available to make that happen. You can see it mounted here on the mirror, I think, of this truck. So lots of different options available for the particular applications. Just quick, another case study for the GO-M. This was for a law enforcement organization out west. And if you see on the left, these are basically signal strength measurements. And you can see where there's big gaps, and there's, dark red, which is essentially almost no coverage. And so they installed a GO-M into a vehicle and then drove the same route. And you can see that there's much better coverage and fewer gaps in coverage. And this is kind of basically, I believe, driving out through the desert out west. So with that, I'm going to jump into Quatra. So first of all, Quatra is our DAS product, and it's not intended to do what we call tier 1 above 500,000 square feet. I mean, it could, but it's not really intended for, airports and stadiums and big, huge public venues where, traditional big iron DAS probably makes more sense for those. And then for the tier 4 on the bottom, below 25,000 square feet, really the Duo and the Go are going to make more sense for those applications. But here in the middle price, between 25,000 square feet up to 500,000 square feet is where it's kind of our sweet spot. And think of, residential towers, mixed use developments, commercial enterprise, business parks, hotels, hospital, retail. That's where we find a real good fit for our Quattro product. So as you guys know, there's several options for the middle price. They could do a traditional DAS, but typically that's very, very costly, and they don't have the budget for it, and it takes forever to deploy it because you've got to wait for the network guys to provide a signal source. We talked about small cells some. Besides the issues that I mentioned with those, there's also issues with getting a uniform coverage, again, because of where they have to be placed sometimes. And then when you have multiple small cells in a building, you can negatively impact performance of the corporate internet connection because the small cell is using that same pipe for backhaul. And then also, as a person moves from within the building from one small cell to another, it's very likely that they're going to drop that call. Wi-Fi calling is another option. Again, there's reliability issues, and especially issues are call quality and call dropping. And then there's the passive DAS, which we talked about a little bit, kind of the broadband repeaters. But again, that's older technology. It suffers a lot with signal loss. As you try to scale it up, it's very hard to scale up. And because you're sharing bandwidth across the carriers, it can cause issues, especially if one carrier cell site is closer than the other. They're not going to get even coverage within that building. So our solution is called Quattro. It's our middle price solution. So for Verizon, we provide 4G LTE coverage. As I mentioned, we are friendly to the operators and to the integrators. It's an all digital Cat 5e based solution. So it eliminates the loss of analog signal over RF cables. As Dean talked about, up to 100 dB of gain, 1,000 times stronger than other things on the market. We can create what we call a supercell when we tether it to a small cell, in those cases where a small cell makes sense. And then we also have different options. So for Quattro, we can do a single carrier, like Verizon only. We can do a dual carrier, for instance, Verizon and AT&T, or we can do a multi-carrier solution, which would be Verizon, AT&T, Sprint, and T-Mobile here in the US. And then, as I mentioned, we've got the Wave portal for remote management. And a really big thing is Quattro can be deployed literally in a matter of hours without, instead of weeks or months. So it's very attractive to the enterprise customer who could get a solution, installed and on the air in a couple days at the most. It is scalable, as we talked about, easiest to deploy. If you look down here on the right-hand corner, these are the bands that Quattro can do. And as I mentioned, we can do Verizon only, we can do AT&T only, we can do AT&T and Verizon as a dual carrier solution, and we can do Sprint and T-Mobile as a dual carrier. So if you need all four carriers, the customer would install 2 layers basically to get all 4 carriers. But we find Verizon only is very popular in a lot of cases, and then next would probably be the AT&T Verizon is what people would migrate to the most. This is what the new units look like. They're very similar in appearance to, a Wi-Fi AP that people are used to. So it's not, they're not eyesores hanging out there. They're good-looking units. And so it's sort of a systems overview. You've got the network unit still, or something that we call the network unit. And now you can connect up to 4 coverage units to 1 network unit. And they're connected, as I mentioned, over Ethernet cable. Needs to be Cat 5e or better. Limited to 100 meters because of the Ethernet standard. Excuse me. However, we can go up to 200 meters using our extender. Hang on a second. So that's kind of on one side of the network unit. It would be the coverage units. On the other side, there's 2 options. You can use a donor antenna, again, pointed to a cell site and communicating to the cell site, much like a phone would. Or you can use a small cell through our device called a small cell interface. A couple other things to point out: the network unit is plugged in to the wall with an AC brick adapter like you're used to. All of the coverage units and the the extender unit are powered over Ethernet. So you don't have to worry about power out here where these coverage units are. So you can literally put them any place that you can get a Cat5 cable to. And then of course, as I've mentioned several times, we have the Wave portal for remote management and monitoring. Just to kind of look at it another way, the network unit, can have 4 coverage units, and they can be spread amongst floors. Oh, I should mention, the network unit with 4 coverage units will typically cover about 50,000 square feet. And again, you can have, actually you can connect up to 4 small cells. Up to 4 network units to 1 small cell using the small cell interface. So in that way, you can take this 50,000 square foot footprint and expand it up to 200 using 1 small cell. And then of course there is the off-air solution. The small cell interface, range extender, different antennas, and then we've got a specialized mount that actually helps the user using our app on the phone. It helps point the antenna in the best direction to get the strongest signal. Just to talk a little bit more about the small cell scenario. As I mentioned, sometimes small cells have to be put in a place that isn't going to provide optimal coverage. So like in this diagram, you're seeing where around the perimeter of the building, the signal might be weaker. And so users out here might be handing off from the small cell to the macro and vice versa. So by connecting the small cell to a Quatra, what we do is we distribute that signal more evenly and stronger. So you have a stronger signal around the perimeter of the building and you maintain dominance over the macro. Here's just what the units look like. It's very simple. You've got the NU, you've got the CUs, you've got LAN cable, maybe a range extender depending on your distance. And then this is what a small cell setup would look like using the small cell interface. So a small cell connected to the interface, connected to the network unit, and then from the network unit out to the coverage units. So very simple to install. This is kind of the overview of the installation. Usually you like to do a site survey to kind of see where the signal is strong and where it's weak. It doesn't have to be a big complicated thing. And a lot of times users know where they have bad coverage in their building. You pull the cable and install the units, plug it in and do the commissioning, and that's it. So very easy to install. Here's just some screenshots of our Wave portal. This is sort of a dashboard page where it shows you how many notifications you have, how many systems you've got out there. There's also a map view, and then you can drill down into sites and systems and look at specific data for each component in the Quatra system. So let's look at just a couple examples. One of them is called the 211 headquarters out in San Diego, which is basically a call center. And this is like a beforehand site walk. Obviously, red is bad, so there's a lot of bad. And then after we put in 1 network unit and 2 coverage units on this floor, the second floor, using an off-air donor antenna, you can see that the coverage is much improved with mostly green and maybe some yellow over in this area. And then on the next floor, they put the other 2 coverage units on the first floor, and again, got great improvement from the before to the after. Another good deployment example, and this would be, it could be Quatra or it could be the Go X. Parking garages are particularly challenging because they've got heavy concrete walls, and propagation within these places is hard. So this is one where we actually did, and this was a particularly bad one because they had all these individual garage slots and heavy concrete walls. So we were able to put multiple coverage units out here and 2 network units probably because it's showing 8 coverage units, and got good coverage throughout the parking garage. And as I mentioned, we do see GoX deployed a lot for parking garages where, on the upper levels it might be okay, but as you go down, it's bad. And so you can get an antenna up above ground and just run a wire down to the lower levels and then propagate that using Go. In terms of other use cases, applications, it's virtually unlimited. I mean, we do portable offices, especially construction sites where there's, not a signal out there yet, or not a strong signal out there yet. Remote areas, agriculture, offices. I mean, the list goes on and on. There's literally nowhere that we wouldn't fit into. So that is the end of the presentation. Are there any other questions, Dean?
No, I don't have any more open questions. There's a couple that I've been answering, just individual questions along the way in the chat panel. But I don't have any more questions. I'll put it out one more time if there are any questions out in the field. Gonna raise your hand in the chat panel and ask.
Yeah, and for those of you that are maybe watching this after the fact, the recorded version, there's an email address here that for general inquiries, and then our headquarters phone number. So please reach out to us and let us know if you have additional questions. We can do additional webinars for smaller audiences and get into a lot more detail. So whatever you guys need, just let us know.
And it doesn't look like we have any additional questions. So I will be posting this webinar. Whoops, one question here. Let me see what it is. This is more of a costing question on how Quatra is costed out, and there's two questions here. I guess I'll let you describe how we work with integrators to, I guess how the integrators establish their quotes.
Yeah, so as Dean mentioned, we work with systems integrators. We actually don't sell direct. We go through a network of resellers. For the smaller products, there's actually some online retail sites that you can buy, like the Duo or the Go from. But for Quatra, you really need to go through one of our systems integrators, and they will do a design and scope out the amount of equipment that's needed, and factor in their installation costs. So it's hard to say. You really need to get in touch with us, and we'll get you in touch with an integrator and work through it that way.
Right. And the other question that came through is, what type of outside signal is needed?
Well, we can work down as low as neg 120 dBm, but we really like to have neg 90, neg 95 to get a good strong signal going through the system and then back up on the uplink.
Okay. Well, as I was starting to say, I think that's the last of the questions. As I started to say, we're going to post this up and we'll send a link afterwards. If you have any questions that you think of, or if you want to share this internally with your group, there'll be a link for you to do that. As Steve said, he would be happy to give it again if you have a smaller group that you would want to do that with as well. But the full video will be posted, and you'll get a link in your email on that. We thank everybody for joining today and appreciate your time. And we hope to be working with you soon. All right. Thanks, Steve.
All right. Thanks, guys.